So, Chris, can you talk us through some of your ground and flying training on the Tornado?
Sure. So up at Lossiemouth, 15 Squadron, arrived there in the summer. And day one of ground school, we were taken over to meet our course commanders and then taken over to see the jet and have the course photo, right? And I tell you, my first thought, so we're standing in front of this aeroplane, my first thought, I'm standing looking at this thing and it is big. And I think to myself, I don't think I can do this. I'm 24 years old, I think. And I'm standing there thinking, I don't think I can fly this aeroplane. It's massive. I mean, it's got movie wings. It's got drop tanks on it. There's a whole bunch of weapons to learn about. I mean, the engines have got reheat. I mean, I've just managed to scrape myself through a Hawk course. I'm looking at this thing. This is impossible. Then, of course, we start on the ground school. And that was 6 weeks, 8 weeks, I think, 8 weeks of ground school. And that consisted of learning all the systems, learning how to fly the aeroplane, obviously, learning about the avionics. But just to give you an idea of the differences, so the Hawk has a set of FRCs, so flight reference cards, pretty thin. There's some emergencies in it. They're reasonably extensive, but not massive, and all the checks tell you how to start the aeroplane and do all various things you need to do it. And it has one pilot operating handbook's own aircrew manual, and again, that's not overly massive. The Hawk is a relatively straightforward aircraft. The Tornado has 4 sets of FRCs, okay, 4 sets, and it has 2 aircrew manuals. These things are like War and Peace. So this was no small undertaking by any stretch. So 8 weeks of ground school, and that culminated in, I think, 8 simulators, where we would learn all the procedures getting into and out of Lossiemouth. We would learn, the handling characteristics of the aeroplane, learn, where you needed to move your hands, to move wings and flaps and gear and all that sort of thing. And also we were learning all the emergency drills, so as many as we could. To get the basic levels of knowledge and ability prior to going to doing the live flying. So 8 weeks after starting, we move across the airfield from ground school, which is the south side, to 15 Squadron, and we're going to go flying in this thing. And I'm still a bit nervous, I'm not going to lie. And we get out to the aeroplane for the first time, and again, doing the walk round. I'm being shown the walk round by another pilot. So the first 8 sorties, I think it was 8 or 10 sorties, were for the pilots, twin stickers. So there's another pilot in the back in a trainer aircraft with 2 sticks, and essentially you're going to convert me to be safe to fly the aeroplane. So I can fly the aeroplane, I can get into and out of the airfield. I know when to move the wings, all that sort of stuff. And I've got an instrument rating. So the idea of that first bit, the pilot conversion bit, gets the pilots to actually be able to basically fly the aircraft. So we did that in around 8 to 10 trips, and then we move on from that into doing the rest of the course. And the rest of the course involves going to the range quite a bit. It involves going to do pairs work, so pairs formation, hitting targets around Scotland, obviously for pretend, and culminates in what we call, the op phase, so a bounced sortie. So you've got 2 aircraft going out there, led by the student crew. We'll talk about that in a second, the student crew. And then there's a 3rd aircraft essentially trying to shoot them down. They have to then evade the threat. There's some simulated surface-to-air missiles out there as well. Evade the threat, hit the target, come back, debrief it, and that's your end of course check before you go to the front line. So that was the course. That took about 6 months. And it was pretty challenging. But the aircraft itself, I remember first getting into it, like I said before, this thing is big, right? So I'm climbing up the ladder into this thing, and the cockpit is huge, and there's dials and buttons and screens everywhere, and taxiing it out onto the runway. And the first time you put the burners in, it feels like you're getting thumped in the back. So you push the throttle through the reheat gate, and you get a kick on one side. And then you push the right throttle through, you get a kick on the other side. You double check the gauges that the burners are lit. You can see the gauges have come up, at which point you then accelerate down the runway, and this thing is going like the clappers. Now, it's no Typhoon and it's no F-15, so let's not make the mistake there. But for a guy, a 24-year-old, who has just finished flying a Hawk and is 8 weeks later now sat in a Tornado thundering down the runway, I was pretty impressed, and actually very much behind the aircraft, because as soon as you get airborne, you're getting airborne about 190 odd knots, right? the gear limiting speed is 235, so you've got to get the gear up, you all get the flaps up before 280. Then next thing you know, you're at 350 knots, so you've got to get the wings back, and all of these things are happening. It's like
Yeah.
so it's phenomenal. And as you can see by the smile on my face, I remember it well, and it was just such good fun, such a great aeroplane.